Toxic people don't just annoy you, they rewire your brain chemistry. Studies show they slash productivity, flood your body with stress hormones, and leave you drained. That knot in your stomach? It's your body screaming danger. Today, I'll give you 7 science-backed strategies to neutralize toxic people without becoming toxic yourself. Number 3 flips conventional wisdom upside down, and number 6 is so powerful, once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Let's dive in. Ready? Strategy 1. Recognize the patterns. The first strategy, pattern recognition. The objective is to identifying toxic behaviors before they escalate. Toxic behavior isn't random, it follows predictable patterns. Dr. Robert Hare's research on psychopathy highlights traits like charm, deceit, lack of empathy, and refusal to take responsibility. Other studies show manipulators often use repeating tactics: intermittent reinforcement, praise then punishment, blame shifting, emotional invalidation, too sensitive, and triangulation. Once you know these patterns, toxic individuals become easier to spot. A colleague consistently blamed team members for project failures while taking credit for successes. Once she recognized the pattern, she prepared documentations before her meetings. This completely neutralized the manipulation attempt at idea stealing or blaming. Take a moment to reflect. Think about someone difficult in your life. Can you identify which of these 4 patterns they most frequently use? This awareness is your first line of defense. The practical application. Creating a behavior log, tracking specific instances of toxic patterns. This serves 2 purposes. It prevents gaslighting by creating an objective record, and it helps you identify triggers that activate toxic responses. The second strategy builds directly on pattern recognition, but adds a crucial element that many people miss when dealing with difficult individuals, one that can transform how toxic people respond to you. Strategy 2. Establish unshakable boundaries. The second strategy, boundary architecture, creating clear, consistent limits that protect your mental health and well-being. Unlike simple rules, effective boundaries include 3 components: the limit itself, the consequence for violation, and, most importantly, consistent enforcement. As documented by Doctors Henry Cloud and John Townsend in Boundaries, limits without clear consequences are often ignored, whereas those that carry well-defined consequences gain respect once consistently enforced. For example, a manager transformed her relationship with a demanding client by clearly stating, "I'm available for calls between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on weekdays. Messages outside those hours will be addressed the next business day." When the client tested this boundary, she allowed calls to go to voicemail consistently. Within 2 weeks, the client's behavior completely changed. The practical application of the boundary formula looks and sounds like this: I will, whatever the specific action is, when this specific situation happens, and if that boundary is crossed, I will apply this specific consequence. Hopefully that makes sense. The key is absolute consistency in the enforcement of your boundary. Now, what I'm about to share with you may contradict against conventional wisdom about dealing with difficult people and might initially feel uncomfortable to you, but hear me out because it's supported by psychological research. And besides that, if you disagree, you could always leave us a juicy response in the comment section below. However, before I reveal the third strategy, I need to ask you this one question. Have you ever tried to reason with a toxic person, presenting facts and logics, only to walk away more frustrated than you were before? Think on it for a bit because your experience of this connects directly to our next point. Strategy 3. Practice strategic disengagement. The third strategy, strategic disengagement, is selectively withdrawing your emotional investment from unproductive interactions. Strategic disengagement isn't avoidance. It's choosing when to engage based on outcomes. Dr. John Gottman's research shows many perpetual problems are unsolvable, making stepping back more constructive than forcing resolution. Across cultures, it's seen as the bamboo that bends or choosing your battles. The point, engage with purpose, not by default. Now, what's particularly fascinating about this strategy is how it creates a psychological phenomenon I'll reveal in just a moment, one that contradicts what most people believe about influence. For example, a professional repeatedly engaged in circular arguments with a very difficult colleague, believing persistence would eventually lead to resolution. It did not. When she instead began responding with, "I understand we see things differently," and disengaged, the toxic behavior decreased significantly within 3 weeks. The practical application is the 30-second assessment. Before engaging, ask yourself, is this interaction likely to be productive? If not, use a neutral phrase to disengage without creating additional conflict. The most important insight. The most important thing to understand is that your response to toxic behavior is the only variable you can fully control. Research on emotional regulation shows that focusing on changing others creates immense frustration, while focusing on managing your own responses creates empowerment. Strategy 4. Deploy tactical empathy. The fourth strategy, tactical empathy, is understanding the toxic motivations without accepting toxic behavior itself. Unlike emotional empathy, tactical empathy means seeing the fear or insecurity driving toxic behavior without getting pulled in. Chris Voss's work on negotiation shows this reduces conflict while protecting boundaries. The motivation shift. Think about a difficult person in your life. Instead of focusing on their behavior, ask yourself, what might they be afraid of? What needs are they trying to meet through this particular behavior? This shift doesn't excuse the behavior but provides strategic insight on the driving force behind the action. For example, when a team leader recognized that a consistently critical team member was actually expressing fear of failure through constant fault-finding. Rather than engaging with each criticism, she addressed the underlying concern. I notice you have high standards for this project. Let's discuss what success looks like to you. The practical application. Separate the person from the behavior by using phrases like, I've noticed this behavior rather than you are being. Because this creates space for change without triggering their defensive mechanism. We've covered 4 powerful strategies and ways to deal with toxic behaviors, but the next one is particularly effective because it completely sidesteps the psychological traps that make most interactions with toxic people so draining. Strategy 5. Master emotional containment. The fifth strategy, emotional containment, is preventing toxic emotions from transferring over to you. Unlike suppressing emotions, containment means noticing when negativity is pushed onto you and refusing to take it in. Dr. James Gross's research shows cognitive reappraisal or reframing situations reduces emotional intensity and stress in tough interactions. A professional described toxic interaction as emotional hot potatoes, attempts to pass uncomfortable feelings to others. When someone throws anger, guilt, or insecurity at you, you can acknowledge it without catching it. Most people overlook this. Dr. Jeremy Jameson's research shows that reframing stress arousal as helpful, not harmful, reduces its impact on the body even if the situation doesn't change. The practical application, the containment visualization. Imagine the toxic emotion as a substance that cannot touch you directly. You can see it, acknowledge it, but it remains separate from your emotional state. This creates psychological distance without disengagement. Strategy 6. Implement gray rock method. The sixth and most powerful strategy, the gray rock method. Becoming deliberately uninteresting to toxic individuals who feed on emotional reactions. Unlike normal interaction, this method minimizes reactivity by giving flat, minimal responses. Research by doctors Jean Twenge and W. Keith Campbell shows narcissists lose influence when boundaries are enforced and toxic engagement is withdrawn. The reaction audit. On a scale of 1 to 10, how emotionally reactive are you to provocative behavior? Lower reactivity directly correlates with reduced toxic interactions. A professional described using this technique with a drama-seeking colleague. I responded to emotional bait with neutral, factual statements. No defensiveness, no emotion, just bland acknowledgement. Within 2 weeks, the colleague stopped attempting to provoke me and moved on to more reactive targets. The practical application. Minimize the 3 E's: emotion, explanation, and engagement. Keep responses brief, neutral, and devoid of interesting details that could fuel further interaction. Strategy 7. Cultivate strategic support. The 7th strategy, strategic support network. Building relationships that provide perspective and resilience. Unlike venting, which often fuels negativity, strategic support means leaning on emotionally intelligent people who keep you grounded. Dr. Julianne Holt-Lundstad's research shows strong social ties boost resilience, helping us recover faster from stress. What many people miss is what psychologists call the perspective effect. The discovery that toxic interactions lose power when witnessed by a neutral third party who can validate your reality, as documented in Dr. Ethan Cross's research on self-distancing. For example, a manager described how regular check-ins with a trusted colleague helped her recognize when she was being manipulated. Having someone who could say, yes, that was inappropriate, prevented me from questioning my own judgment. The practical application is to use the reality check protocol. Identify 2 to 3 trusted individuals with good judgment. Create a regular practice of discussing challenging interactions to maintain perspective and prevent isolation, the condition in which toxic behaviors thrive. Implementation strategy. Here's how to implement these 7 strategies effectively. 1. Start with pattern recognition to identify specific toxic behaviors. 2. Establish clear boundaries with consistent enforcement. 3. Practice strategic disengagement from unproductive interactions. 4. Deploy tactical empathy to understand without accepting. 5. Master emotional containment to prevent emotional transfer. 6. Implement the gray rock method with highly toxic individuals. 7. Cultivate strategic support for perspective and resilience. Begin by selecting the one strategy most relevant to your current situation. Practice it consistently for about 2 weeks before adding another. Remember that mastery comes through consistent application, not perfect execution. And you cannot necessarily control people with toxic behaviors, but you can control your response to it. These strategies don't just protect you, they transform how you engage with all relationships in your life. Keep checking back daily for more pragmatic principles. We post 2 to 4 videos every week with practical tools you can implement immediately. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next revelation about the psychological patterns silently undermining your influence. This video is intended as an opinion piece, based on reflection and designed to spark conversation. If you find yourself experiencing any of these situations, please seek guidance from a qualified professional. So, if you found this video helped you recognize a toxic pattern in your life, hit the like button and comment below. Which of these 7 strategies will you implement first? Your insight might help someone else reclaim their peace and power. Click on my next video to your left and to the right to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.